Hey folks, so this is a video just talking about how we can set up constraints in Motion Builder. So this would be if you wanted your character to hold a weapon or something, and with this method you can actually pass the weapon between hands as well, so we can actually constrain to two different objects. So what I've got a scene here, and I've got two joints in my scene, and I've got a object here as well. So these are like the things I want to constrain to. So it could be, imagine they're your character's left and right hands, and this is the thing we actually want to constrain. So this would be like, I don't know, the weapon or something. And I've got some animation on there so we can see if the constraints are actually working. So the first thing we're going to do, before I actually add the constraint, I'm going to set up an object on top of this thing that is actually the thing I'm going to constrain, and then I'm going to parent the cube under that. And that just gives me some more flexibility. So if I wanted to add some extra animation on the cube, I could do that because I won't be constraining the cube directly. So let's go over in the asset browser. Inside the templates and elements, there's a null here, which is just an object which won't render, but it's kind of handy for this kind of thing. And I'm going to drag it over. Now, I'm going to scale mine up, but I wouldn't recommend you do that. I'm just scaling it up so you can actually see it on the screen. But scaling things generally can cause problems, particularly when you're exporting between different packages. So don't scale it yourself, but I've scaled mine up so you can see it. And now what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to drag the cube to be a child of the null. So I'll click on parent so that it's parented under the null. And also let's just rename that to something like constrain me. There we go. So we know that's the thing that's going to be constrained. Awesome. And let's just double check. Let's move that around. And yeah, obviously it's moving the cube with it. So next up, I'm going to add the actual constraint. So these are in the constraints folder here inside the asset browser. And the one we're going to use is this thing called a multi-referential constraint. So that's one which we can constrain an object to multiple things. So it's really handy if we have we want to pass the gun between two hands and so on. So what we do is we drag it over. We can either drag it over to the viewport or we can drag it over to the navigator. It's probably a little bit easier to, because the null is quite small, to make sure we actually drag on the right thing here. So let's drag it over here and let go. When we click on constrain object, there we go. And this window appears here like this. Now, if you ever want to get back to this window, like later on, let's say you click on something else, basically there will be a folder here in your navigator called constraints. And if you open that up, you've got your multi-referential constraint there. If you double click on it, it will bring this window up again. So there we go. Now, in here we have a section called rigid objects. That's basically the thing that's being constrained. And we've got the constrain me locator in there, which is great. And we want to add in to, you can place two objects in there, but we're not going to add another object. We want to place something into the parent objects. So that's a thing that it's constrained to, the parent object. So what we'll do is we'll drag that. I don't think you can drag this from the viewport, it won't work. And there's no middle mouse button drag. So you'll have to drag it from the navigator. So in your hierarchy, you'd have to go and find the character's hand, which will be somewhere in the skeleton structure. But once you've got that, if you just left click and drag it over to the parent objects one, so let's click on that. And you'll see now we've got another object, so we can actually drag in another object if we wanted to, at some point, you knew that you wanted to constrain it to the other hand as well. We can drag that in now, so let's drag that over. And you can see you can keep on adding extra objects as well. So we've got these two objects here. If you want to remove one of these, if you drag it, let's say you dragged it into the wrong section, like I dragged it, that's not letting me do it, maybe because it's already been constrained, but let's say I dragged the cube in there, I don't want to do that. What you need to do is just drag it out again, basically, and then it'll disappear from there. So I can drag that out and I can drag it back in again. Great, so that's all set up. Now, the final thing you need to do in here, and this is something you probably will forget, and just it's a bit annoying, but you basically need to turn the constraint on. So by default, the constraint is turned off. We click on this active button, and now the constraint is turned on. So yeah, if nothing's happening, just think to yourself, have I actually turned it on? And yeah, there we go. So now I play through, and you'll see that nothing's happening. And the reason nothing's happening is that we can now control what this is constrained to from this menu here. So it's in the key controls section. And by default, it's constrained to itself, which means basically it's not constrained to anything. So that's the equivalent of, yeah, not constrained to anything. But we can click on this and we can pick the object we want it to be constrained to. So let's go through and let's just say that we want, in fact, when I did that, sorry, I added a key here. So I'm going to just remove that. And I'm going to go to frame 60. Let's say we wanted it not to be constrained to anything for the first 2 seconds. And then at frame 60, we want it to be constrained to this one. This is the bone 1. So let's come here and let's click on bone 1. And you'll see it automatically kind of keys that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through to frame 120. And then I'm going to click on bone 2. And there we go. You'll see that for the first, oh, okay, hang on. I've actually messed this up a little bit. So because I deleted that keyframe originally, I think let's go back to frame 0 and let's go to, say we don't want it to be constrained to anything at frame 0. Adds a key. Brilliant. And then at frame 60, it's constrained to the first bone. That's great. And then from frame 120, it's constrained to the second bone. That's all good. And then from frame 180 onwards, we want it constrained to nothing again. So I'll pick constrain me here. And that now keys that. And now that is going through nicely like that. So that's all working pretty cool, I think. So just be aware that this kind of works fine if you finish all your animation. But if you were now to go back in and make some changes to the animation for these things, it could have unknown kind of consequences. It seems to mess up at that point. So what I would recommend you do is you wait until you've completed your animation and then do the constraining right at the end. And you know, if you do need to go and make changes afterwards, then you may have to go through and do the process of constraining the object again, because it doesn't always seem to work particularly well if you make changes to the animation of the objects it's constrained to. So just be aware of that, please. So at the end, you won't be able to export this directly into Unreal. So basically, the constraints themselves don't export across. If you export this in FBX, you know, Motion Builder has constraints set up in a different way to Unreal. So what we need to do is bake the animation for this constrain me object so that it actually, you know, adds a key to every single frame, and it's kind of baked into the timeline. So to do that, what you do is you click on the constrain me thing, and we come up here to animation, and we say plot selected. I come over to animation, I go to plot selected, and I'll click on plot, and you'll see that actually it's only added keyframes to the area that's actually moving. So if we come in here and we go up, you'll see that now there's no keyframes at the end. That might cause an issue in Unreal because if you want it like staying in position at the end, then maybe it will actually kind of start looping from here, for example. So it might be that you could go in and you could either manually add a key here. So if I just click in key, then that will actually add in a keyframe there. Or potentially what you could also do under plot selected, if you turn off the constant key reducer and click on plot, it will then just plot every single frame, including the frames where the object's not actually moving. So now if we export this, let's go to File and Save As, and I'll call this plotted. And let's bring that into Unreal. If I go to import, and let's just find it. There we go. And let's open that up. And obviously we do want to import the animations, so just make sure that animations is turned on, and we'll click on import. That's fine. And now we've got like the animation here. Let's bring that in. Let's click on play, and there we go. You can see that those the animation is being brought into Unreal, and it's working as expected. Okay, so the final thing I just wanted to show you was if you've got a scene where you actually need have more than one thing constrained in your scene, let's say you want to set up 2 of these constraints, you can do that. Let's say you have a gun at some point and you also have a torch, I don't know, James does, or you have, I don't know, multiple objects. Then you can set those up, but just be aware that in order to be able to see the right options here, if you click on the actual constraint here, that changes the the list you have here. So I've got here in this scene, I've got 2 objects. Both of them have a constraint set up on them, but this one, the first one, is kind of constrained to these 2 objects, and the second one is constrained to this object. And when I click on each one, you can see that the list of parent objects is different for each one. And if I want to see the correct one here, I basically need to have the correct constraint selected over here, and then with that selected I can now choose the appropriate thing as constraint 2 from this point here.